Hey, so I just wanted to shout out you guys for all of the support in the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months on the channel. You guys have been killing it, and I appreciate that you watch the videos. On the channel right now, we're pushing for 150k subs pretty soon, and I'd like to do something cool for it, like a Q&A or something like that. However, sometimes there's a lot more views on a video than there are subs, so be sure to press that sub button and show some love. Subscribe and turn on notifications, that way you don't miss any uploads. Anyway, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you at 150k. In the last video, we went over some champions who are currently pretty weak, and we're looking to give them some love and some buffs. Overall, the reception was pretty cool, and today I'd like to do the opposite. I want to look over some champions that probably deserve some nerfs. Let's clear the air before we start and be fair to everybody. I'm not trying to make this video to make anyone upset, nor tell you that your champion needs to be gutted and that I hope you lose all of your LP now. There are no malicious intentions with this video, and my goal is just to look at champions that I feel are a bit too strong, but at the same time you should understand that that will always be a subjective opinion. Of course, this is just going to be based off of my experience and my thoughts here, so if there's anything that you disagree with or get upset by, don't have a cow, because we're just here to talk about League and all talk about the game that we have a love-hate relationship with. After watching the whole video, please feel free to leave feedback and comments and keep the discussion going in the comments section for any champions that you may agree or disagree with. If there's anything that you felt I got wrong or straight up missed, feel free to let me know. Anyway, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the video with the really big hitters, I figured we would start with some honorable mentions, just to cover all our bases. These will be champions that, at best, could probably just use a minor nerf or adjustment and are definitely on the strong side, but by all means, they're probably not in desperate need of a nerf next patch, so let's run them down pretty quickly. First, let's start with two of the strongest enchanters in the game not named Yuumi, which are Nami and Janna. These two ladies have been very good for a long time, and Nami has been a top tier support for about 3 years. I don't think that Nami is unfair or broken to play against, which is likely why she's allowed to be so strong for a long time. Overall, Nami is a pretty well designed champion, one of the best in the game. Janna, unfortunately, on the other hand, is possibly too good with her W max setup. You are a very potent poke champion that scales up to be a great disengager later on into the game. Janna has a lot of power after her recent buff that reduces cooldown on her E if you successfully land your CC, and she feels both good in lane and out of lane right now. Volibear is a recent top tier threat both as a support and a bruiser style jungler and top laner. He hasn't 100% solidified his place in the meta just yet, but is definitely on the up and up, and he's probably going to be in line for nerfs later on, because don't be surprised when you see a lot more of this champion. Kha'Zix was already slapped with a nerf earlier this season when he became the best jungler in the game with the introduction of a new rune, Dark Harvest. This rune is perfect for him in many different ways, and it was basically made for him. He is a strong AP jungler, an okay mid laner, and a really solid bot lane AP carry. His first nerf to the rank 1R is already pretty brutal because it makes it hard to secure kills with it until level 11. However, the rest of his kit, being really good at clearing and scaling into a 1v9 machine, is probably still too good. Singe just received a buff on this patch and had his win rate in 1 to 2 days skyrocket to the top of the list. After a couple of weeks, the dust will finally settle on him and he might not be in need of nerfs. However, the early signs do show that he's way too strong. In general, to be honest, Jinx is a very fair champion. She has a very defined and clear weakness pattern in that she's very bad early game, but eventually she kills everyone. This has been her theme and playstyle since day one of her release, and she holds a very good place in the meta and has for some time. She's consistently held the best win rate all season long for ADCs after a nice set of buffs in a row, and is a solid threat. I would argue she's the champion that deserves nerfs the least on this list, just because she still gets blown up by Rengar on cooldown for the entire game until she gets her items. Overall, the champion snowballs incredibly hard, making her a massive threat if she ever gets a lead. I did also want to touch on Akali pretty quickly, but I'm not going to put her on the main list, and instead choose to make her instead an honorable mention, just because we already know this champion is problematic and has quite the history of being broken in competitive. We all already know this one, so I figured we wouldn't waste a ton of time on her and instead choose to talk about other champions. One thing that I will say though is that her rune page and her build is constantly being innovated and evolved, and I think a recent setup might be her best ever, so at least this is something new to talk about. If you do play Akali, I highly recommend trying this rune page with Electrocute into Resolve Secondary and starting your first item as a Doran's Ring. While it is true that Akali doesn't have mana, we've seen quite a few manaless AP champions start Doran's Ring in the past, and recently Vladimir and Akali have been using it quite a bit. It's just because you get AP and health, as well as 2 potions. Anyway, this setup is super good early game and allows you to snowball pretty easily, so if you do play Akali, I would definitely recommend trying this one out. Alright, the honorable mentions are out of the way now. Let's dive into the big boys. Oh, Riot, you've outdone yourself again. Just when we thought we'd be all done buffing champions for no reason, just when you thought we wouldn't balance around skins anymore, you always come back. You always prove us wrong. He essentially got buffed out of nowhere for pretty much no reason. He was already strong. He wasn't the single best jungler in the game, but he was good enough, for sure. And that should never really be a reason to buff a champ. The balance team should never be asking themselves if we need to buff an A tier champion simply because they are not literally a top 2 or top 3 champion for their role. He was given a massive buff that has taken him way over the edge to now have the 2nd highest pick rate and the 3rd highest win rate for junglers. His damage, clear speed, massive slow on its W once it's evolved, and relative safety in the jungle make him a top tier pick that both laners and junglers alike constantly fear. So you ask yourself, why would they buff him? What is their motivation? Well, you see, it's already almost September. We are approaching the end of the year, and at the end of the year, championship skins become available once again in the store. Last year, Kha'Zix had his championship skin released, and it has a crapload of chromas, and it's a really good skin, I'll be honest. To me, this is a 100% money move by Riot, buffing a champion they didn't need to in order to sell more skins. The way they did it last year is that all of the teams at Worlds have corresponding chromas on the skin, and I could easily see them refreshing that, reusing that content, and putting it for this year, for Season 9's teams. This probably made so much profit for them last year that they're looking to do it again, and chances are he will be nerfed right at the start of Season 10 after all of the skins are done selling. Whether you agree or disagree that Kai'Sa is currently overpowered, I think if we just look at her kit by itself, objectively, this has to be the most overloaded kit ever released. Let's go ahead and tally up what Kai'Sa actually has in her kit. Kai'Sa is a marksman that has an AoE high damaging ability that's not an auto attack or a skill shot, that also has great wave clear because minions that are low take bonus damage, an attack speed steroid, a movement speed steroid. Both of the previous 2 steroids have their cooldown lowered by auto attacks, a massive long range mobility spell that grants a shield, on hit damage, a passive that can be applied by teammates, percentage missing health damage, mixed damage, AD and AP ratios on 3 abilities and her passive, while she can also easily build AD or AP and is extremely flexible based on team comp, long range poke, and finally, stealth. The thing is, she's not particularly weak at any stage of the game. She isn't the best early game, but her laning phase is not bad at all, considering that she also scales very well. There are no weaknesses to this champion, nor is there really a reason to never pick her. It's good in many different spots, and has been several times throughout the last year since her release for a good reason. She's been nerfed several times. At one point, her Q actually had 12 missiles instead of 10. Right now, she's received a lot of buzz in the community because recently over in Korea, her win rate passed 50%. You might say to yourself, hang on, 50%? What's the big deal? It's right at 50, it's balanced where it should be. But I want you to consider the implications of this. This champion is the highest picked champion in the entire game, and in Korea, it has a 44% pick rate. Kaisa is picked in half of every League of Legends game. Half. And this is a champion that's supposed to be hard to play. She's supposed to be really difficult and have a high skill cap, but she's not. When there are other champions that have this insane pick rate and are supposed to be hard to play, typically they hover around a 46 to 48% win rate. Exil is the best example. Recently he was nerfed, even though he had a 48% win rate, and he along with Kaisa was picked in around half of all League of Legends games. Kaisa's is 2% higher, and when you consider how many hundreds of thousands of millions of games you're talking about here, that's a big number. Now, this champ is one of my most hated champs, if not my most hated jungler, and a large part of that actually doesn't have to do with the kit itself, but actually a bug with the kit. Nunu and Willump ever since the rework have had this absolutely disgusting bug that turns them into a stealth champion, literally. There's actually a funny story with this. Riot August got hit with this bug in his Diamond promos and it made the front page of Reddit. Now, he responded to this in kind of a toxic way, saying stuff like, "I'm gonna go fix it myself on Monday," and stuff like that. And actually, they deleted the VOD. He deleted his response to it.
Wait, what?
Now, he got pretty mad, but maybe Riot just didn't like the way that he responded in this particular clip, because he does go on to talk more about it on Twitter and talk about potential fixes, and he says it's really hard to reproduce. My problem is that they've claimed to fix it on several occasions, but it still happens. A lot. It's so incredibly common. What more can a League player say about Vladimir? He's in a similar light to Jinx in that, yes, he has a very, very defined and clear weakness. He has no lane priority. His weak early game can be heavily abused, and he doesn't come online until he gets cooldown reduction. Fine, I agree. The core problem is how unhealthy he is late game or when he snowballs. When this champion reaches about 400 AP and 40% CDR, that threshold makes you need to watch out. His insane healing, damage, AoE, tankiness, and the fact that he has a pull, he will run down your entire team. He's easily one of the top 1v9 champions late game, and if you ever let him scale, you might as well FF. There isn't much you can do once he reaches late game. But the problem is, that's the counterplay. The counterplay is to gank him. The counterplay is to put him behind. The counterplay is to brutalize the early game. But this is solo queue. This is uncoordinated play. Not everybody's going to play perfectly, and not everybody's always going to gank him. Sometimes your teammates think the game is over because Vlad is 0-3 and we don't have to worry about it anymore, and then they choose to goof around. At a certain point, he just wins the game for free. Pyke is an insane champion. The recent buff to his ultimate gold generation has allowed him to be ridiculously strong. He has no weak points in the game. His early game is strong, mid game strong, late game even stronger, mainly due to his Q and ultimate always keeping him relevant. It is impossible to punish Pyke for mistakes in solo queue. He can miss position and mess up big time and take 90% of his health, but he will never die. His mana costs are too low, so he'll always escape, and the gray health and stealth removes counterplay to his very squishy kit. I've never played versus such a frustrating champion. A champion where I feel like the player isn't even that good, but he always makes it out. He's like 8-2-15, and you look at that scoreline and you say that guy must have played well, but honestly, I don't really think he did. He can roam extremely fast, which again is a very forgiving ability. Generally speaking, most supports will have a pre-plan to their roams, and they need to start roaming much earlier. A Pyke player, however, doesn't even have to be the best support player, and just roam instantly from one lane to the next. His kit works very well with Presence of Mind and Legend Tenacity. His weakness of being CC'd then insta-bursted is gone because of this rune, so now instead of going Mercs, he can always go Moby Boots and refer back to point number 4. If your team is losing, then you need to win 2 fights-ish to come back usually. Not with Pyke though. If he cleans up one fight, then he forgives all of his team's mistakes and gives them the gold lead. Items also synergize way too well with his kit. Youmuu's and Duskblade add more burst, movement speed, and vision denial, all for a very low cost. All in all, it doesn't really matter if you're a bad player. You can play Pyke and do well because his kit is just so forgiving. It allows for a lot of breathing room when it comes to macro and micro errors due to his gray health, movement speed, low cooldowns, and low costs. If you roam late, no problem. Press W and use your Moby Boots. Did you miss position and get chunked? No problem, just heal up. Team is behind from getting out macroed and outplayed? No problem. Use your ult once and clean up one team fight and you're right back into the game, if not ahead, because Pyke's gonna ping his gold and show everybody on his team that he has 6,000 gold. Just revert the Grievous Wounds buff on this guy, or at least lower it. Nothing else. Everything else in his kit is fine. Nothing is problematic at all besides that. Nobody, no high elo players have any idea why they made this change. It's crazy. Alright, where do we begin with Talon? Talon probably has the best early game in the entire game. He snowballs incredibly hard and has a ton of map pressure, which is always important in solo queue. He has so much lane priority with Tiamat in his W, and in compensation for the fact that his kit is relatively linear in terms of gameplay, where he can really only kill a squishy and get out, he doesn't really have a solid split push, so he has to be overtuned. I will say, Talon is pretty fun, and I'll be honest, he's kinda cool to play. And I understand that a lot of you may not even think that he's OP, because if you actually look, he isn't that good in lower elo. You might think that he's easy to play, and because he's completely brainless when he one-shots you while playing Misfortune, he really isn't fair. But consistently, Talon holds a much lower win rate in lower elos. In Diamond Plus, Talon completely shines, and has the best win rate in mid lane, at nearly 55%. However, drop this down to Silver, and his win rate drops to 48%. This will largely be due to the fact that players in these games can get fed and get kills, but killing Misfortune over and over again doesn't win you the game. What wins you the game is killing the Nexus, and that can be a different beast. It's one thing to get a lead, it's one thing to flash on someone and kill them with your insanely strong level 2, but knowing how to use your lead, knowing how to snowball, use lane priority, and knowing how to be effective when ahead is a tall task for lower elo players, so you're typically better off playing champions that scale very well and are much easier to execute late game, such as Master Yi. Why on earth is this champion a Soraka, Janna, Sona hybrid that you literally cannot focus? Are you kidding me? Who designed this champion? Ever since Mordekaiser's rework, he has become an incredibly dominant pick. To start off, he has insane synergy with Conqueror. This is literally the perfect rune for him. He's melee, he heals, and does damage over time. This rune is designed for Mordekaiser. His passive is very strong, and he wins most trades because of it. A lot of people also don't know how to play around his shield, because honestly, it's kinda weird now. Even playing Mordekaiser myself, I struggled to know exactly how to use it for me a couple games until I finally got the hang of it. Of course though, the shining point to his kit is his ultimate. It's like, imagine if they gave another bruiser this R. Imagine if they literally gave Riven, Darius, Jax, Udyr, or Garen the R that does not let you run away or kite them. To add icing to a very messy cake, your teammates can't even help you. This isn't the Shadow Realm, this is a nightmare, and ADCs are completely abused by this ability. I don't really know if it could ever be balanced. Maybe it can. Maybe he just needs more number nerfs. But dang, that ult is something else. Alright, here's the lowdown on Kiana. You really can't play around her. Her combo is literally undodgeable, because if you're hugging a wall, then you're dead. If you're not close to a wall, then you get pushed. Let's say you're really far from the wall, and you're in the middle of the lane. She can then use her stealth to zone you into the wall. It just feels like there's a lack of interaction when it comes to fed Kianas, mostly because of her ultimate and her stealth. On top of that, the champion is overtuned, but that's not really her fault. They always like to buff new champions to make people play them and incentivize them, so that's okay. That doesn't have anything to do with her kit. Numbers can always be fixed, and that's okay, but her ultimate numbers are definitely way too high. She's one of the only AD assassins who has a true 1v9 ultimate that can easily hard carry games even when your team kinda stinks. Most assassins are just single target, but Kiana is literally like Orianna or Gnar tier with her team fighting ult, but at the same time, she's like Akali, Zed, and Yasuo with her normal abilities. It's sort of just a bad combination for a champ to be an assassin while also having that powerful of an ult. and I'm not really sure where they could go from here with her. She is probably going to have the Echo treatment, where she can be broken in mid lane for months on release, and then gets nerfed and reworked a bit, and then is going to be moved to another role, such as jungle or being a bruiser in the top lane, then back to mid, then nerfed again, bad for a couple years, and then eventually will stabilize, just like Echo had to go through. Finally, let's talk Catarina. This champion got a lot better with the build innovation this season, with players starting to take Conqueror and Death's Dance. This is another classic example, where a champion doesn't really need to receive any changes to their kit whatsoever, and all of a sudden with a new build, a new rune page, and they're suddenly top tier. This interaction of items and rune is obviously good because Aatrox and Riven do the exact same thing, but of course it's solid on Catarina as well. You end up being a very heavy sustained bruiser that can stay in the fight and not get completely one-shot when you get hit with CC, and because Legend Tenacity is absolutely broken, you remove a lot of your weaknesses as well, just like Riven and Akali already do. The thing is, she's not too bad with other runes as well. Electrocute is fine, and if you're smurfing or against an easy matchup, Dark Harvest can be OP too. Catarina already had a very strong spot in the meta, and on the same patch as Kled, she also received a Grievous Wounds buff, which she didn't really need. I can definitely see why people would think that she's not that OP and doesn't deserve nerfs, because truthfully, I too see a lot of Catarina players get fed and still lose because they throw or don't end the game with their lead. But the thing is, that's not because the champ can't, that's just because they messed up and aren't perfect. There are a good amount of high-elo Catarina mains this season for a good reason. She's solid as ever and is one of the hardest snowball champions in the entire game. But I will say, be fair and be honest, I also think the Catarina mains are just insanely good at their champ. I am really impressed by them, and honestly it's one of the few player bases that I do think is pretty impressive these days. I'm not really that impressed by Zed mains or Yasuo mains anymore, but Catarina mains do impress me. I think the champ is pretty hard to play at a perfect level and be really good with, and sometimes they blow me away. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for the list today. I thank you very much for watching till the end, and let me know what you thought of this video. Do you agree or disagree? Do you think there's a champion I missed? Let me know. Also, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notifications, that way you don't miss any uploads. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.